And in manga, simple character design, but super cool hair.
It's always super
Can't
cool
forget
hair.
that.
Cannot forget that. And hair is one of the hardest things to draw, and it sucks. But
Yeah.
that's where all the energy goes, drawing hair.
Welcome to Nerdlandia.
Welcome to Nerdlandia, where we're always doodling in the margins. I'm your host, Emily Case Buskirk. Today, we're talking with Robert James Russell, an author and illustrator based in Lincoln. His upcoming graphic memoir, Hard Body, focuses on toxic masculinity and body image. We discuss what makes graphic memoir a uniquely expressive form, his current creative inspirations, and how anyone can get started making diary comics. Rob, thank you so much for joining today. I can't wait to talk about your work and your upcoming graphic memoir.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So to get things started, I just want to talk about what is the medium of graphic memoir or diary comics. Some people might not know.
Yeah, good question. And you said medium, which is fantastic. Sometimes people think of graphic work as a genre, and it's not. It's a medium. And I'm on a personal mission to try to change those conversations. Like I actually kind of hate that you go to a bookstore and there's a specific graphic section, as opposed to a really good graphic novel is a novel just with text plus image, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the easiest way to think of graphic memoir. It's a memoir just in graphic form. I think the biggest difference, and the thing that it's taken me a long time to figure out as I work on this book, is you have to use 10 words instead of 100 words in a traditionally written book, right? Like the images have to do so much lifting that you're not writing a manuscript in a way, you're writing a script that has to then have images attached to it and things like that. And it's very different. To back it up a little bit, diary comics, I think, are a smaller, if you want to think about them in segments, like they're a smaller segment. Diary comics are smaller group of time. There's a thing called 24-hour comic day that happens once a year.
Yes.
Where people, yeah, it's fantastic. And at some point I will try it. But for those that don't know, you just draw as much of your day as you can when you're awake. Those are diary comics. They're small representative samples of very hyper-specific moments in time. Graphic memoir, or memoir in general, is not a whole life. It's not a biography or an autobiography. It's a specific theme of your life or following very specific events. I see diary comics as an entry point to graphic memoir, to be honest. Like when people are first starting out with this stuff, I think the easiest way to start off is a diary comic. Okay, you don't know what to do? Draw what you did today. You know, that's a great starting point for people that want to get into this.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great explanation. And we pretty much met because you taught a diary comics class, and I took it, and it was such a cool experience, and like so many amazing people in that class that I didn't expect to meet. I guess that's kind of why I used both terms, and I'm glad you kind of explained the difference, because before I didn't quite know like what the distinction was, and there can kind of even be some overlap too and some blur.
There is.
So
yeah. Well, and it gets confusing because I just said like a autobiography or a biography is typically someone's entire life, right? But we refer to this type of work as autobio comics, confusingly, even though you're not writing necessarily an autobiography of your entire life. And diary comics are memoirs, just little. So like, yeah, there's a lot of interchange of words, I think. But I do think diary comics are hyper specific. I think it's the best way to think about them, like hyper specific moments in time.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, your background is as a writer, and I mean, I'm sure that you'd always drawn and stuff, and now, now you kind of more that approach. So what's your backstory there?
If you had known me from like 0 to 16, you would have thought that I was going to go to art school, because I was the artist, the drawer.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since I was a little kid, I was convinced that's what I was going to do. I wanted to be an animator at Disney for most of my life.
Oh my gosh.
Made comic books in middle school and sold them. I made trading cards of comic book characters and sold them. I did everything, took classes, did everything possible I could do. But my ambition, at some point, I'd say probably in middle school, early high school, my ambition outweighed my ability, and I was very impatient. Like I could have gotten there with additional work, right? But what I discovered, right? But what I discovered was writing sort of could get me there faster. Like I was working on some elf stories, which I'm laughing because I actually really wish I had access to these, because I feel like in my mind they were fantastic. I'm sure they were, but and I found that I could describe these fantastical landscapes better than I could draw them, and that sort of started leading me into the writing world as a serious art form.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and there's also some like weird stuff at play too. Like I was trying to come to terms like, what does it mean to be an artist? I was unpacking masculinity, and for it's the stupidest thing ever, because all my comic heroes were dudes, but I was still convinced that, you know, a guy shouldn't be an artist, right? Like playing in my head part of it as well too, and that I was like, no, writer is the appropriate thing to do. It's not cute for a 17-year-old to be drawing picture, you know, that kind of I think was playing in the back of my head as well too, as part of it. I had a lot of support from my family, but this is all peer and pop culture, and, you know, all that sort of toxic crap.
Yeah.
And then I got to college and I really focused on writing, and I just became a guy that doodled, and that was it. And anybody that kind of met me from college on, I don't think really understood how much of my life was art. And I've been very fortunate. I've published a couple small books, and I've published some stuff here and there, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm very fortunate about that stuff. And 2019, I just felt the urge. I was living in Indiana. I felt the urge to get back into drawing in my spare time. There was nothing else to do in Northwestern Indiana where I was. So I got back into like watercolors and doing some stuff. And I was like, oh, this is feeding me in this really fantastic way. And it kind of just built it out from there. And not to get ahead of ourselves here, but it felt like I could tell stories this way, in a way that I either wasn't comfortable telling in my writing, or it just felt more complete in some way.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, the part that's really relatable to me about that story is, you know, being a teenager and just being like super impatient with yourself as an artist, because I got into photography as a teenager, and I thought, you know, I was on the path of like becoming a photographer for a time, but it was mostly because I was like too impatient to work on, I think, drawing and maybe some other art mediums that I had been introduced to.
That's why I got into photography too, by the way. Later on in life, because I was like, well, this will fill that gap.
This is faster.
Yeah, this is much faster. Yeah, except it wasn't, because I still had to get film developed back. That's how.
I just like jumped right into digital, so I didn't have that hurdle. Gosh, there's just misguided things. If you could just like have the foresight to like stay patient and just like stick with one thing, but that's okay. It's the journey.
It is the journey. And I think what served me well is, I think, writing and leaning into writing for so long. And I was an editor for literary journals for 10 plus years. It taught me how to be a better storyteller. And I think if I hadn't taken that side road, that detour, I'm sure I would have been a better artist than I am now if I had kept pushing myself at this point. But I don't know that I would have been able to tell a story as good as I can tell, right? Like, and to some degree, if your art is fantastic, great. But if you don't know how to tell a coherent story, at some point you're going to lose people no matter how good the art is, right? And I think that in the end, it's interesting how writing and illustration have sort of rounded me out, I think, in that way, right? So I was really good at, you know, drawing from a really young age taught me to visualize stuff. So when I transitioned to writing, it wasn't super difficult. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see that. I can imagine this and think about that. And then writing taught me to fill in all the gaps that I needed to. And then now that I've started combining those two things, I'm like, oh yeah, storytelling. Yeah. It's not bad. Yeah. I can do that. So
That's
I
awesome.
I think the journey really helps. Like, I think the stuff that I'm actualizing in my life now with my art was only possible because of these detours that I took.
That makes sense. Yeah, kind of like this like passing back and forth and kind of helping each other. Yeah, that's a cool way to think about it. And also, like you mentioned, there is something about the graphic memoir format that is a lot more difficult to convey just in words. I also think that one thing people don't really realize about that format is that so much of your time you spend just like planning out, like framing it and like the panels. And it feels like inevitable in a way when it's done really well, and like, oh yeah, like of course it'd be that way. But actually having the skill to like plot it out in that way is like really difficult. So.
It is. And there's shortcuts, like Watchmen famously did this, but you can cut that out if you have every page has a grid of 9 panels and it's the same on every page, and you can take that away, and that does work. Sometimes you can make stories like that very easily. But if you're thinking about everything that you have control over on a page, it's more control than a traditionally written book in a lot of ways, right? Traditionally written book is words on the page, and with punctuation and paragraph breaks, there are ways to sort of tell the reader how things should be read, but then it's really up to the reader to sort of figure that out. You have so much more control in a graphic project. Do you want there to be gutters in between the panels? Is it a big spread? How are you having them read the panels? Are there no panels on the page, right? And I think that control is a really important part of the process as well too. So yeah, you can get lost in those details really, really easily. Like, it's the hardest part. Like, this is not any sort of brag, but like when I sit down and work on the book, the drawing is easy. It's the figuring out what's going to go, how it's going to look on the page that takes like all the brain time.
Seriously.
Once I know that, I'm good to go.
Then you just go.
Just go.
Yeah, there's like so many parts to it, but when you taught that class, I feel like you did a really good job of like breaking it down, and people who might be new to like drawing or new to diary comics, like it felt really accessible. And so yeah, I'm not trying to like scare people away with talking about the difficult parts, because you can make it like as easy or as hard as you want. But
Absolutely.
But yeah, like what do you think makes diary comics such an accessible and versatile medium?
I mean, I think it's what you said. I think you can get lost in the stuff, but it also can be really easy. Diary comics, I think, are the most accessible way, because you can have just a single panel, and I'm going to put some text in the top that says today, and then you can draw a picture of what happened to you today, and that's it. And that's pretty simple. And you also, I think one of the things that we talked about, and thank you for the kind words about the class, but one of the things I think we talked about often that I really want to reinforce is it's really not about artistic ability. There are a lot of artists who have not had training in the arts that are illustrators and things like that. It's you figuring out your style and then just leaning the heck into it.
Absolutely.
And figuring out what the narrative is and how the style sort of complements it and things like that. So what makes it accessible is you don't have to be a comic book artist to do this. And the simplest thing you can do is tell a story about your life. And what makes diary comics fantastic is that obviously everybody's lives are completely different. Even the mundane really comes alive on the page. And I think actually that's what makes diary comics, and specifically like when we're talking about like 24-hour comic day, it's not like these people are like out having adventures in these comics. They make them. It's like, I woke up and had breakfast and oops, I'm out of milk. Okay. But you can make that charming
for sure
just by the realness of it, and I think that's what does make this so accessible. And it's, there's an interesting, I think, space that graphic work like diary comics, graphic memoir, or whatever we want to say there, sort of fills. It takes time, it takes effort, but making a diary comic takes significantly less time than writing a short story or writing a novel, and you can sit down and maybe an hour later have a 3-panel comic that tells a story. And that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing too is that especially people who maybe don't draw all the time might get a little intimidated, but honestly, like simple drawings are more relatable to audiences. I mean, we see this with so many artists online having like, really successful work in like simple drawings that like convey a lot of energy and a lot of character. And that's really cool too.
Yeah. And there's a fantastic, I mean, it should be everybody's Bible if you're going to be an illustration, called Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. And we talked a lot about it in the class that we had. And there's a very famous, I go to this often when I'm talking about comics. There's a famous panel that he has that shows a smiley face in one end and then a really detailed portrait of a very specific person. And they say the comic's really interesting because the more detailed you get, it does not mean that you can't buy into the story. It just means that you're now reading something about a hyper-specific person. And the history of comics, a lot of comics have often portrayed the heroes in a very, not abstract, but less detailed way, because they want the reader to picture themselves in there. So
Yeah.
Tintin's a great example. I grew up reading Tintin comics, and Tintin is very, very simply drawn. Even though Tintin is a very specific character, he's very simply drawn, and we can sort of imagine ourselves as Tintin. Manga is probably the most simple. Like heroes in manga stories are always incredibly simple. Bad guys, very, very detailed. And it's because we want the artists want the reader to imagine themselves as those heroes. So yeah, simple work can still be very, very emotionally effective. Like you don't need to have details upon details upon details to get something to give the reader some emotive feeling, you know?
Yes. And in manga, simple character design, but super cool hair.
There's always super
Can't
cool
forget
hair.
that.
Cannot forget that. And hair is one of the hardest things to draw, and it sucks, but
Yeah.
that's where all the energy goes, drawn hair.
Yeah, are there any illustrators or authors that you're inspired by at the moment?
Yeah, I'm gonna show and tell.
Yeah, go
Let me
ahead.
grab some stuff. Hold on.
Okay.
This is a book that I have talked about a lot in my newsletter that I put out.
Yeah.
Called In Waves by AJ Dungo. It's a book about a man and his girlfriend. His girlfriend is diagnosed with terminal cancer, and they're both surfers. And it's a real simple color palette, and it's one of the most moving graphic memoirs I've ever read. And it weaves in some historical elements to it, and it should be a bigger deal than it is. Like it's incredible, and it's been out for a while, but I probably go back and read this 2 times a year because I think it's that powerful. And I think it really shows what the form can do. I mean, this is a really good example of 2 pages here with very little text on it. And in fact, the book in general does not actually have a lot of text. And it's so deep, though. It's so deep.
Yeah.
Really, really fantastic.
It looks fairly monochromatic with the color palette, too.
It is. The flashback pages are in a sepia tone. And then everything else is in that sort of teal aqua color. It's really beautiful, and it really shows how you can do so much with less. I don't have a copy of it on me, but there's this really incredible book I just read, I'm obsessed with, called Sense by Marc-Antoine Mathieu.
Okay.
And I don't have a picture of it, but it really pushes the limits of what a comic does. There's no text in the entire thing. It's about a man is wandering in a place he's never been before, and just starts following a bunch of arrows, and that's the entire. I mean, that's the only plot there is, and it's so good. It's so good, and it really opens up some really fantastic conversations about what is the philosophical ramblings of comic books. Like, what is a comic book? When is a comic book not a comic book? When is a book not a book? Kind of thing. Kim Suk Gendry Kim is a Korean artist who wrote a very famous book called Grass. I highly recommend. It's a very hard read. This is a new book about pet ownership, dog days.
Ooh,
and it's
all right.
It's really lovely, and I'm obsessed with it at the moment.
It's awesome.
And then I keep going back to Adrian Tomine. Adrian Tomine is an illustrator that I have been obsessed with for a very, very long time. Hard to choose. If I had to choose a favorite of his, it'd probably be this book, The Loneliness of the Long Distance Cartoonist. But this is also a book that I go back to again and again and again. And when I talk about, there's a simplicity to this. It's just, it looks like it was done in pen and graph paper, deceivingly simple, but really, really beautiful. And this, I love showing this to people who are discovering the form for the first time, because it really shows how you can do so much with so little.
Yes.
I mean, he's an incredible artist, but this book is very restrained in some really beautiful ways.
That's awesome. Well, and then it just reminds me of what else I love about this form, because I mean, there is so much you can do, and people are always experimenting and always doing these crazy things that work really well.
Yeah.
So it's always just fun to see.
Yeah, and I think that's the cool part. If you can think it and draw it, you can have it. There's no budget for that, and I think that's the incredible part. And there's a really, really, really fantastic book called Upgrade Soul. It's the most banana splits sci-fi thing you've ever seen. That the kind of thing that they would struggle to understand how to make a movie out of, but my God, it works as a book. It's so incredible. It's so incredible, and I think that's why popularity of comics, like if we're talking DC and Marvel, like, okay, that has waned over time, but like graphic novels and things are only getting more and more popular because like the creativity at display, you don't have to have a budget from a studio to make a film about it. Like you could just do it. You just draw it, you just make it. And there's some really banana splits books out there that I think couldn't exist in any other form. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. You know?
Absolutely agree. Mm-hmm. So on that note, tell us about your upcoming memoir, Hardbody.
Yeah.
What are you bringing to the farm?
What am I bringing to the farm? I'm not prepared to answer that question. My book is about, I guess in the simplest terms, my book is about body dysmorphia and understanding the sort of toxic masculinity that lives, I think, in a lot of different corners and seeps into people, religion, pop culture, family stuff. And it's very much about me and trying to understand where this came from myself and then understanding how I've gotten to a much better place in my life, right? And it definitely goes to some very dark places that I was at to understand what it is. But I mean, I'm excited about this book because there's not a lot of public positive conversations about body dysmorphia in men. I think this is not the manosphere, right? And none of that crap. This is not like men have to, no, this is breaking down the idea of what masculinity even is and how it enters people and think that this is a way they have to live and this is the way they have to be and all that kind of stuff. And really, like I said, really shows some very dark periods in my life, but a necessary, I think, to really get the point across of how bad this is for me and anyone else who, has body dysmorphia and whatnot.
I totally agree with all that. I mean, toxic masculinity hurts everyone. And so I'm definitely excited to see your thoughts and feelings on that.
It's a lot of feelings, a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings in it. Yeah, it's the process has been interesting because it's my first time making a book, and it's the book I pitched. My editor is incredible. The book I pitched was definitely more essay-like, where it was talking about maybe more historical elements rooted in this. And my editor has pushed me to be more memoir. And it's hard. Memoir is hard. When you talk straight memoir, it's hard because you show some really dark times, and I'm in a much better place now, but you want to sort of have these knee-jerk reactions of like, but it gets better, or, I didn't mean to act like that kind of thing. But it's a journey, right? Like you read about people hitting their lowest, knowing that they're probably going to rise out and become better. Like that's the narrative journey that happens. And you have to sort of trust that process. And that's been difficult, right? Yeah. Reliving difficult periods of my life and then having to draw them again and again and again. It's therapeutic in a lot of ways, but also it's really topsy-turvy. But I'm excited because I think it's a necessary conversation. So.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure it's just tough to put yourself out there like that. I mean, I can understand the impulse to want to be really objective and informative about it. But also it's going to be a better story, more impactful for sharing that with audiences. So
I think so. I think so. I think truth is important, and it's interesting. I think as difficult as it is at times to be working on this book, I could have never done this book as a traditionally written book. There's a way, in some ways you can hide behind the art. Mm-hmm, it acts like a little bit of a buffer between you and the story, which I'm in a better place now because of it, because I've been working on it for so long. But when I first started working on it and was drawing myself in a human form when I was coming up with ideas for stuff. And that was really tough because I'm talking about how much I hate my physical self, but then have to draw my physical self. But then I leaned into drawing myself as this rabbit character named Robbit, which sort of softened the blow a little bit, right? And I wasn't drawing myself, I'm drawing Robbit. And it was a way for me to buffer myself further and be able to really get into this in some interesting ways. And now it's fine. Now I don't really have a problem getting into it, but I think that's the sort of beauty of the forum is it allows us, I think, to tell some difficult stories that many of us would not be able to tell in a traditionally written form.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm very excited because I was going to ask if the rabbit avatar will be making an appearance. So that's awesome.
Yeah. I had to convince my editor, but I said I'm writing an entire book about how I feel or felt completely just not a part of society and outside of myself all the time, and it makes sense that I'm represented not as human. And he was like, yep, that makes sense. So yeah, he is me in the book, and like I said, it was an easier way for me to sort of begin the storytelling process by using him.
Yeah, and I think that like even that technique is just one of the many ways that makes graphic memoir more powerful than just the written word, especially when it comes to talking about these really complex culture, identity, all of these really like heavy, pervasive things, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And you're right. I mean, graphic work is the interplay of text plus art. And the cool thing about it is you can have a single image on a page with, like I showed you from that book, in waves and maybe just a couple lines of text, and you still get lost in trying to understand the way that the image is playing with that text. And again, that interplay I think is really fantastic. Or, you can have a completely blacked out page with a couple lines in white text and no images at all, and it still is really doing something artistically there. So there's a lot of different ways that you can present it, or you can have a completely, panel if you want to tell a story that way as well too. And I think that's the cool thing about it. Like we were kind of mentioning this earlier, like it can look like anything, which I think is pretty tremendous. And my book has some pages that it look like a typical graphic novel where it's panels everywhere leading into panels, and then series of pages where it's single images doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and then some pages where there's no images, like I was mentioning. So it's cool that I can combine all of those depending on what's best for the story on a page.
100%. So to switch gears a little bit, I also like seeing your like travel inspired illustrations. Do you have any like favorite recent ones that you've done?
I was in Taiwan in December, and in January was my fourth or fifth time, I can't remember, but Taiwan, I love Taiwan. Taiwan's an awesome country. And I tend to draw food that I eat in places when I travel because I love food and it makes me very happy. And I really liked the food drawings that I was making in Taiwan. I do most of my doodling on an iPad. So technology, I get that, but I say that because I'm going to be a hypocrite for a moment, but like I've also trying to get away from being on my phone all the time and things like that.
Yeah.
I remember reading research years ago that like if you travel and do nothing but take photos the entire time, you're less likely to actually remember the things that are happening because you're so stuck, you're not in the moment, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely take pictures, but I take great pains to make sure that I'm remembering the smell, remembering the sights, and using my senses for everything and like that. So me going back after a day trip or something like that and going back to my iPad and doodling a bunch of stuff, or if I have a notebook and doodling it as a way for me to sort of process what I've seen in a lot of ways. And I love hiking, I love outdoor stuff, but food is I think food is a connection to cultures in a way that nothing else is, right?
Absolutely.
I'm not the first person to say that, to be very clear, but like I believe that wholeheartedly. So like documenting like this incredible meal I had or my favorite snacks I've eaten is always, to me, seems like a no-brainer as a way for me to kind of just be able to pick up that memory. If I look at that drawing, yes, I remember what that tasted like,
Yeah. What's your top thing, like the first thing you want to eat when you go back?
In Taiwan, it's dumplings, specifically soup dumplings, because that's their jam, and it's my favorite food on the planet. And there's a couple places in the U.S. you can get really, really good soup dumplings, not in Nebraska. So when I go there, I'm like, this is the first thing that I want. There's also this place. My in-laws live in a very small village, and there's this place, and the only thing they do is make roast chicken in these clay pots, and that's all they do.
Oh yeah.
And it's unfathomable how good it is, and I very, very much crave that. Like even just thinking about it right now, I'm like, yep, I could house a whole chicken right now. So some stuff like and then fruit, I think especially too, like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I really love fruit, and I hate North America because we get a very small fruit season, and then everything is just hothouse grown. And then I go to Taiwan, and it's like everything literally was just picked. It's the growing season all year. Enjoy,
right.
So I always get like a bunch of passion fruit and guava. I love guava and fresh pineapple, and there's a thing called a custard apple that has a consistency kind of like pudding inside, and it's very, very sweet and tastes like brown sugar. It's incredible. Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like ruined for avocados. I'll still get them here, but like, what a disappointment after traveling to Mexico and Puerto Rico. And one thing I won't get here is mangoes. It's like just objectively no.
It's a crapshoot. I go to Singapore every year because I lead an abroad trip for my day job. And the first thing I do there is there's a varietal of mango called a honey mango that I've never seen in the US. Maybe it's here somewhere, but I've never seen it.
Yeah.
And the first thing I do is go and buy like just a bulk of those and just gorge myself because it is the best thing. I swear it is the best bite of food you will have in your entire life. It is so perfect. And like Taiwan, it's kind of always in season. So
yeah,
it's like, and it's really fantastic and fresh. So
at least we're like getting into farmers market season. So we can get like produce that actually tastes like how it's supposed to taste. But
that's true. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's the best we can get here for now.
It is. I'll take it.
Anyway, for anybody who would want to draw their own comics, how do you recommend that they get started?
I'm going to grab something again. Hold on.
Yes, level of show and tell.
That's right. This is the book I was talking about earlier. The cool thing about comics is you can pick up a graphic novel that looks interesting to you or a memoir or whatever and read it and sort of figure out the flow, right? Like very simply, like Adrian to mine book is the same number of panels on every page. You get the basic idea of what's happening in that. If you want to go a little deeper and understand the meaning and the history of certain things, I think this is a necessary purchase for anybody that wants to do it. But like we were saying earlier, I think the simplest thing is like, you want to get into comics, you have to, like writing, you have to figure out what your style is. Like, who are you on the page? And more specifically, who are you in this project? How this project is going to look might be very different from your next project, depending. And if you, number one, don't know what your style is, and if you're very new to drawing, you should just draw every day. Not even talking about narratives, just every time you see a piece of paper, doodle on it, figure out, get that comfort of holding a pen, get that comfort of drawing lines and circles and figuring out the bare minimum of what your style is going to be on the page. I also think one of my favorite exercises is taking a film that you really love and taking one scene from that film and then recreating it as a comic, even just in stick figures, to kind of really get a sense of how cuts work, camera angles work, and camera movement. Do we have a wide shot? Is it a close shot? Every panel that you have in a book is a shot, and there's a lot of similarities in filmmaking and comics making, and that can be a great way of understanding without going to school and taking classes. Like, oh yeah, there's a close-up shot of this character, and it feels very intense. And now we have a long shot, and we see, and they're clearly trying to show me the whole landscape. Okay. And you can start piecing together and be like, okay, I can do the same thing in comics with this, right? So, but if we ignore all of that, like what we were saying earlier, if we ignore all of that, the simplest way is to just draw about your life. Like, what happened today? Draw it in a panel, draw it in 2 panels, draw it in 3 panels. And one of the things we did for my class was like, I love homework assignments. You're like, okay, you have 3 panels. That's it. How do you tell a story in just 3 panels or 4 panels or whatever you want to do?
Yeah.
That's a great starting point. Like and that sort of forces you to understand who you are on the page and space limitations. That takes a minute to realize as you start giving yourself limitations like that of what you actually don't need to show and what instead you should be focusing your time on. So reading as much as you can is huge, and seeing people's different styles and their approaches and stuff. But I think at a minimum, you sit down and, all right, well, I went to the grocery store today. I'm going to make a 3-panel comic and try to make it as interesting as I can go. That's it. And that's your entry point to diary comics or graphic memoir or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And footnote for listeners, he showed, again, the Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud.
Sorry. That's right.
Yeah. And then I guess on top of that, are there any other like graphic novel recommendations you'd provide to somebody who's like trying to get into the form then?
Yeah, I'm going to show and tell again, and I will say the names of everything. Listening. Fun Home. This is by Alison Bechdel, is very famous. I mean, it sort of reinvigorated what I think graphic memoir can be, and it holds up to all the praise. It's an incredible book. Highly recommend it. Black Hole by Charles Burns. Hold on, I'm going to grab a bunch of stuff. Charles Burns is one of the, oh my God, preeminent living illustrators, and this book is, I mean, it shows exactly what this form can do, what this medium can do with drawing. and I cannot recommend it enough. Jillian Tamaki and Mariko Tamaki have this really fantastic book called Roaming. They're cousins. One's the writer, one's the illustrator. This, I think, came out last year, but this is another book that I go to so free. Like, I love this book so much. It is so beautiful. A story about three friends on spring break together and sort of growing up and in college and sort of the ins and outs, fraught relationships that happen and things like that. It's really fantastic.
Yeah.
Juliet by Camille Jordi is the weirdest, most beautiful book I probably own. I mean, maybe it's not that weird, but it's really beautiful. It's really fantastic. It's just really good, really good. And the thing is, I'm showing a bunch of books that are very, very different from each other style wise as well too, because I think that's also really important.
Absolutely.
And then another book, Full of Myself, Siobhan Gallagher, about body stuff, like my book. This book is a gem. It is absolutely. It's so funny. It's so funny. I wish my book would be funnier. Like, in some ways, I am not that funny of a human. And then I read this, and I'm like, I wish I could do what Siobhan Gallagher does. It's really, really tremendous. So those are some ones that I really recommend that I've read already, but I go back to and look at often and am quick to recommend to people too.
Yeah, it's a good combo of some that I've read and then some I need to read. So thank you. I always appreciate your recommendations.
Yeah, happy to.
With that, we are heading into the current favorite segment. What is your favorite thing of the moment, Rob?
It's my favorite album last year by this artist, Cindy Lee, made this double album called Diamond Jubilee. It's really incredible, and refused to stream it on Spotify or anywhere else. And the only way you could get it...
Respect.
Yeah, respect, but also annoying, because the only way that you could listen to the album was on YouTube.
Okay.
Or you could donate money to the band's website and get files, and you could like burn your own CD, but like it's 2025 and I don't burn CDs anymore.
Who even like has a CD drive on their computer anymore?
I don't know. There's a rabid fan base, and a lot of people were doing this. And Cindy Lee was going to be in Omaha last year, and I was really excited, and I was going to go because there was like limited edition vinyl, and I was like, oh my god, yes, now's my chance. And then canceled that show and all the rest of the shows. And it really bummed. Anyways, a small amount of vinyl came out for this album, and I was able to pick one up, and I have been listening to it every single day. Like, it is such a good album, and I'm just obsessed with it. Yeah. Love
the recommendation, because you mentioned the artist, and I was like, oh, I didn't hear about that one, but now I don't feel as bad. It's like, it sounds like pretty niche. So how did you discover the artist?
I think Pitchfork did I think that's what it was. Pitchfork. Cindy Lee has been around for a little while, and I wasn't familiar. And Pitchfork basically did this review. It was like, stop the presses, listen to this album. It's incredible.
Yeah,
and it's absolutely incredible. So I was I went to YouTube that day and I listened to it, and I was like, oh my god. And then the worst part about it, I listened to a lot of music, and the worst part is anytime I wanted to listen to the album, I had to just have YouTube on, which I didn't love because the fidelity is not great. So now I can listen to it on vinyl whenever I want. So.
Hell yes. I love this for you.
I know, thank you. I'm very excited.
I'm kind of a broken record this season because I have been talking about biking stuff a lot, but as of 2 days ago, I finally signed up for RAGBRAI, which is like the Iowa bike ride. Yeah, you have heard of it. Yeah. Liz McHugh has done it, and we're going to be doing it together. We're on a team called Team Tabby. That's the name Liz thought up for it, and I'm so excited.
I love that. I'm excited for you. That if I had any athletic notions, that it sounds fun in theory, I will never do it, but I'm excited for you.
I'm stoked. Good excuse to finally have something to train for again, so that'll be great too.
If we're talking athletics, I will say that I went bouldering for the first time a few weeks ago. I liked it more than I thought I would, so much so that I want to go back. I don't know that I'd call it yet hobby, but it's something.
It's on its way.
Maybe we'll see. But
Probably by the time this episode comes out.
There you go. Yeah, I'll be a bouldering expert by the time this episode comes out.
Oh, the obsession catches on quick. Because the first few times you're like, okay, that was more fun than I thought, but also like kind of tricky. And then I think like after you like kind of get into the groove, then it just kind of takes over your life. So be prepared for it. So
I'm not ready for that yet. Oh gosh, not ready for that yet. Yeah.
I love that you brought it up because that was a big obsession of mine. And I even did my comic about it for your class. I did about and how it helped me approach my perfectionism. And
you have to, your brain kind of goes quiet, and it's like,
yes.
Where do I put my hand? Where do I put my legs? And it's a really beautiful thing, So.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It was awesome to get to catch up and learn more about your graphic memoir.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a blast.
After that conversation with Rob, I'm more excited than ever to read his graphic memoir. I love his enthusiasm for the form and the way he's able to make it approachable for anyone. Hopefully this episode has inspired you to dig out your sketchbook or check out a graphic memoir at the library. I am definitely going to be looking into those recommendations he shared. Next up, we're talking with Wendy, the co-founder and owner of MW Climbing. That will be on June 11th. We'll also have some bonus episodes to share over the next few weeks. See you then. Nerdlandia is hosted, produced, and edited by Emily Case Buskirk. Theme song and ending credit music by Keith West. Cover art by Ellen Stebbings. Additional music from Pixabay. Anything else I didn't ask about?
I don't think so. I've covered everything. I've covered my whole life. I'm done. I got nothing.
Great. All right.
We did it.
Yeah, it's a wrap.
Yeah, that's right.